In the city of Truro, in Cornwall, people gathered for a quiet moment of reflection. The gathering took place at the weekend. It was not a military event. There were no uniforms, no battlefield briefings, no sirens echoing across the sky. Instead, it was a moment designed to remember 4 years since the war in Ukraine began and to recognize something else: the support offered by ordinary people far from the front lines. The event was called In Line of Light for Ukraine. It was organized to mark the 4th anniversary of the war and to acknowledge the role that communities in Cornwall have played in helping those who fled the conflict. The gathering was held in Truro. Cornwall Council's resettlement service funded the event. For many of the people present, the moment carried a mixture of reflection and gratitude. 4 years is a long time in any conflict. For Ukraine, it has meant years of defending cities, protecting civilians, and resisting Russia's invasion. But for many Ukrainians who were forced to leave their homes, the war also created a different journey, a journey across borders, a journey towards safety. And for many of them, that path led to Cornwall. Local authorities in the region have been closely involved in supporting people who arrived under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. That program was created to provide shelter for those forced to flee the war. It relied on volunteers and families willing to open their homes, and in Cornwall, many did. According to Cornwall Council, more than 670 households across the county stepped forward. These households welcomed people they had never met before. They offered space in their homes. They provided safety during a time when Ukrainian families were facing the uncertainty of war. Through those efforts, more than 270 people were given a place to stay, a number that reflects the scale of community involvement across Cornwall. Behind every number is a personal moment, a door opening, a family arriving, a room prepared for someone who had left their home behind. The event in Truro was designed to acknowledge those moments, to recognize the generosity shown by local residents, and to create a space where Ukrainian culture could be shared with the community that welcomed them. One of the organizers of the event was Irina Chernenko. She helped bring the gathering together. Her role reflected the connection between the Ukrainian community and the people of Cornwall who had supported them. Chernenko explained that the event had a clear purpose. It was a moment to say thank you, to thank the Cornish community, and to celebrate Ukrainian culture with the people who had opened their homes. Events like this carry meaning in ways that go beyond speeches or ceremonies. They create a space where two communities meet, one community that arrived after fleeing war, another that offered safety when it was needed most. In Truro, those communities stood together during the event. Some people present had traveled thousands of miles from Ukraine. Others had lived in Cornwall their entire lives, but for that moment, they shared the same space, the same purpose, a recognition of how acts of kindness can travel across borders. Cornwall Council's resettlement service played a central role in making the event possible. The council had been involved in coordinating support for Ukrainian families arriving through the Homes for Ukraine program. That support included helping connect people with households willing to host them. It also involved providing assistance as families adjusted to life in a new country. The event in Truro reflected the ongoing relationship between those who arrived and those who welcomed them. It was a chance to pause, to mark the passage of time, and to acknowledge the people who made those first moments of arrival possible. 4 years after the war began, the conflict in Ukraine continues. Cities across the country remain under threat. Families continue to face the consequences of Russia's invasion. But far away from the battlefield, communities like Cornwall have become part of another side of Ukraine's experience, a side defined not by destruction, but by support. The gathering in Truro captured that connection. Candles and lights reflected the idea behind the event's name, a line of light, a symbol of solidarity, a quiet expression of support reaching across distance. During the event, the atmosphere carried a sense of appreciation, not only for the safety that had been offered, but also for the chance to preserve Ukrainian identity and culture while living abroad. Sharing cultural traditions becomes a way of maintaining connection to home. Music, language, food, art, these are pieces of identity that travel with people even when they leave their country behind. Irina Chernenko spoke about this connection during the event. Her words reflected both gratitude and the importance of cultural exchange. This is a way to say thank you, she explained, and to share who we are. The gathering allowed people to reflect on what had happened over the past 4 years. For some, it was a reminder of the moment they left Ukraine. For others, it was a reminder of the moment they chose to help. And for the wider community in Cornwall, it was an opportunity to see how their actions had shaped the lives of people who arrived during a time of crisis. As one attendee quietly reflected during the evening, the meaning of the moment could be expressed in a simple sentence. Sometimes a door opened at the right time can change someone's whole life. The lights in Truro marked more than an anniversary. They marked the connection between two places, Ukraine defending itself against Russia's invasion, and Cornwall offering safety to those who had to leave. In Cornwall, the response to the war in Ukraine unfolded in living rooms and spare bedrooms. It did not begin with large institutions or government buildings. It began with households, families who saw the images of the war, families who understood that people were leaving their homes with little notice, families who decided to offer something simple but powerful, a place to stay. The Homes for Ukraine scheme created the structure for that decision. The program connected Ukrainian families fleeing the war with households in the United Kingdom willing to host them. It was designed to provide immediate safety, a roof, a bed, a place where people arriving from a war zone could begin rebuilding a sense of normal life. In Cornwall, the response was significant. According to Cornwall Council, more than 670 households across the county opened their doors. Each of those homes became a place where Ukrainian families could find temporary safety. The numbers tell part of the picture, but they cannot fully capture what those moments looked like. A door opening, a greeting in a language that might not be shared, a suitcase placed inside a new room. Many Ukrainian families arrived carrying the weight of sudden departure. Some had left homes, jobs, and familiar neighborhoods behind. The war had forced them to move quickly. For those arriving in Cornwall, the welcome they received helped shape the first stage of life away from Ukraine. Through the Homes for Ukraine scheme in the region, more than 1,170 people were given a place to stay. That figure represents individuals of many ages, parents, children, grandparents, each person arriving with their own experiences of leaving a country under attack by Russia. The support offered by host families often went beyond providing accommodation. Hosts helped newcomers understand local services. They helped children adjust to schools. They offered guidance through everyday tasks in a new place. These small acts made the transition less overwhelming for people who had arrived after leaving their homes behind. Cornwall Council's resettlement service helped coordinate many of these efforts. The service worked to connect Ukrainian families with host households. It also provided assistance as people settled into their new environment. Resettlement is a complex process. It involves helping people navigate unfamiliar systems, healthcare, education, community support networks. The resettlement service helped ensure those arriving in Cornwall had access to guidance and assistance. The event held in Truro reflected this entire process. It was not simply a cultural gathering. It was also a recognition of the community effort that had taken place across Cornwall. Each household that opened its doors played a part in creating that effort. Some hosts welcomed individuals they had never met before. They prepared rooms in advance. They rearranged their homes to make space. In many cases, relationships developed that went beyond the original act of hosting. Shared meals, conversations, moments where two families learned about each other's experiences. The event in Truro offered an opportunity to recognize these connections. People who had arrived through the Homes for Ukraine program stood alongside the residents who had welcomed them. They gathered not as strangers, but as members of a shared community. For Ukrainian families, maintaining cultural identity while living abroad is important. Language, traditions, celebrations, these elements help preserve a connection to home. Irina Chernenko, one of the organizers of the event, highlighted this during the gathering. Her role helped bring Ukrainian cultural expression into the event. Music and cultural elements provided a way to share Ukrainian identity with the Cornish community. For many attendees, this exchange created a deeper understanding. Host families who had welcomed Ukrainian guests were able to experience the traditions and cultural expressions that traveled with them. At the same time, Ukrainian participants had an opportunity to express gratitude. The purpose of the gathering included a simple message: thank you. Thank you to the households who opened their homes. Thank you to the community that made space for people arriving during one of the most difficult moments of their lives. Gratitude can sometimes be expressed through words. Sometimes it is expressed through shared moments. The event created space for both. People spoke with one another. They shared memories of the past 4 years. They reflected on how quickly those years had passed. For some Ukrainians, Cornwall had become a temporary home. For others, it had become a place where they built new routines after leaving Ukraine. Children attending local schools, families participating in community events, life continuing in ways that allowed people to regain stability. But the reason they arrived remained present in everyone's mind. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the war that forced thousands of families to seek safety abroad. The anniversary marked during the Truro event served as a reminder of that reality. 4 years since the war began, 4 years during which communities across Europe and beyond have responded to the needs of Ukrainian families. Cornwall's response became one example of that broader international support. More than 600 households choosing to welcome people they had never met. More than 1,000 individuals finding a place to stay, each number representing a moment when someone decided to help. The gathering in Truro created an opportunity to recognize those moments. Lights symbolized connection. Voices carried messages of gratitude, and the presence of both communities in the same space demonstrated how acts of hospitality can shape lives far beyond the initial decision. As one participant quietly reflected during the evening, the meaning of those years could be summed up in a few simple words. When people help each other, the attendee said softly, distance between countries becomes smaller. The lights of the event in Truro carried that message. A reminder that even during a war, communities far away can play a role in offering safety and support. By the time the gathering in Truro reached its quiet moments, the meaning of the event had become clear to everyone present. This was not simply a commemoration. It was a moment where two communities could stand together and recognize what had happened during the past 4 years. The event, titled In Line of Light for Ukraine, brought people together for that purpose. Its name carried symbolism. A line of light suggests connection. Individual lights placed together forming something larger. In Truro, that image reflected the relationship between the Ukrainian community and the residents of Cornwall who had offered support. For many of the Ukrainian families who attended, the gathering was an opportunity to express gratitude. When people flee war, they often leave with little time to prepare. They leave homes, they leave familiar streets, they leave behind routines that once defined everyday life. Arriving in another country can bring both relief and uncertainty. Relief at reaching safety, uncertainty about what the future may hold. For those who came to Cornwall through the Homes for Ukraine program, that first moment of arrival was shaped by the welcome they received from local households. More than 670 homes across Cornwall opened their doors. Those homes offered safety to more than 1,270 people who had fled the war. The numbers are important, but the experience behind those numbers is deeply personal. Each arrival carried emotion: exhaustion after travel, concern for loved ones who remained in Ukraine, relief at finding a place to stay. The event in Truro created space to reflect on that shared journey. Host families attended alongside Ukrainian guests. Some had lived together for months. Others had formed friendships that continued even after hosting arrangements changed. The evening created a setting where those relationships could be acknowledged. Irina Chernenko, one of the organizers of the event, helped guide that moment. Her role reflected the bridge between the Ukrainian community and the people of Cornwall. She described the purpose of the gathering simply. It was an opportunity to say thank you, and it was also a chance to share Ukrainian culture with the community that had offered support. Cultural exchange often becomes an important part of life for people living far from their homeland. Food, music, language. These traditions carry memories and identity. By sharing them, Ukrainian families were able to bring a piece of their home into the community that welcomed them. For Cornish residents attending the event, this exchange offered a deeper understanding of the people they had helped. Hosting someone is often the beginning of a relationship. Learning about culture and traditions deepens that connection. Moments like this gathering allow communities to move beyond the initial act of assistance. They become moments of shared experience. Lights played an important role in the symbolism of the event. The idea behind In Line of Light for Ukraine reflected solidarity, small points of light coming together to form something visible and meaningful. For those present, the lights represented support reaching across borders. They represented the connection between a region of England and a country facing war in Eastern Europe. They also reflected hope. Hope that even during difficult times, acts of kindness can create lasting bonds between people who once lived far apart. Throughout the evening, conversations moved easily among the crowd. Some spoke about the early days after Ukrainian families arrived. Others spoke about the friendships that developed during those months. Children who once arrived as strangers were now part of local schools and communities. Families who had opened their homes had become part of their guests' daily lives. These shared experiences were present in the atmosphere of the event. Quiet conversations, smiles exchanged between people who had come to know one another through difficult circumstances. The gathering also served as a reminder of why those connections began. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a war that continues to affect millions of people. The 4th anniversary marked during the event highlighted the passage of time, 4 years since the conflict began. 4 years during which Ukrainian families have faced displacement, uncertainty, and the challenge of rebuilding their lives away from home. For the community in Cornwall, those years have included moments of generosity and cooperation. The Homes for Ukraine scheme created the framework, but the real support came from individuals who chose to participate. The decision to open a home is a personal one. It requires trust, it requires empathy, and it requires the willingness to welcome someone who arrives after leaving everything behind. In Cornwall, more than 600 households made that decision. The event in Truro recognized those choices. It created a moment where gratitude could be expressed openly, where Ukrainian families could stand beside the people who welcomed them and acknowledge what those actions meant. Irina Chernenko reflected on that spirit during the gathering. Her words carried a tone of appreciation that resonated with those listening. "This evening is about gratitude," she said quietly, "about remembering kindness." The lights that formed the line across the event space symbolized that kindness. Each light representing a gesture of support, each light representing a connection formed between people who once lived far apart. In the quiet moments near the end of the gathering, the meaning of the evening could be felt without the need for many words. Communities that began as strangers had become connected through shared experience. A city in Cornwall, families from Ukraine, a gathering that brought them together to reflect on what had happened during 4 years shaped by war. As one attendee said softly while looking at the lights surrounding the event space, "Sometimes the brightest light is the one someone else gives you."